Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast, in which Craig Touch and myself, Roland Hume, chat about this crazy industry we're in of writing and self-publishing. We got a very special episode planned for you today. So we don't have a special guest except the special guest himself, Craig Touch, owner and founder of Hidden Gems and author himself. How are you doing today, Craig? And what have we got in store for people?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Roland. I think, we wanted to just sort of catch up together, talk a little bit about, one of the episodes that's upcoming, because I want to do something, try something a little bit different where we're going to sort of ask for some feedback, maybe some possible questions from people. But also then just sort of look back at the last few months since the beginning of the year. The podcast has been growing a bit, and we're not a huge podcast. We knew going in it was never going to be massive because our audience is only just authors, right? But we're slowly creeping up there. We're up to probably getting close to about 200 listeners per episode on average. So I thought it would be cool to sort of go over the top 5 episodes that have in terms of popularity that we've done since the beginning of the year, and just talk a little bit about them in case people miss them, but also in case there's new thoughts about them or places to sort of dig in a little deeper. And then next week we'll get back to the regular scheduled program with this one specific episode that's upcoming that, like I said, I want to sort of get some feedback on.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited about that one. So that sounds great. Where are we going to get started then?
Well, so one of the things that I talked about, and I was talking to you about this earlier. I can't remember if we had mentioned it on a podcast or in a blurb, maybe, or not a blurb, a newsletter that I had sent, or maybe even we mentioned it on one of the blogs. But back I think it was late last year. The big news was Brandon Sanderson, very well-known author, started a Kickstarter, and his goal was $1 million, and he was going to write 4 books. And his Kickstarter went viral, went crazy. And I was just looking at it now. It's a lot higher than it was when I last looked at it. It's closed off now, as far as I understand. But it got to $41 million, almost $42 million, which is absolutely crazy.
I mean, isn't that crazy though? I mean, that's not the kind of money you think of when you think of authors, and especially not like self-published authors. I mean, that's phenomenal.
No, I mean, it just blows me away. And the idea, he was already a big name, and he was going to do it for $1 million, which is already a big ask. But he has a built-in audience. He's for fantasy and all that stuff. He's a well-known author. But $41 million, like, he's getting $10 million a book. Like, people are not, even big name authors aren't getting that kind of advance from traditional publishers anymore.
Yeah, I mean, not even close. I mean, you're talking J.K. Rowling money there, aren't you?
Yeah, and it's like it was for 4 books that he hasn't even written yet. So I don't know. It's crazy to me, but it sort of talks to the idea of crowdfunding your book and whether or not that is something that other authors can do. And to be honest, like, I had heard about people doing Kickstarters, but never necessarily successfully, or certainly not anywhere near this successfully. And then he went and did his, and I thought that was kind of a one-off, but it's come to my attention recently that it's not really a one-off. Kickstarter actually has a publishing sort of section and people that run those projects. And so what we did is we reached out, and next week we'll be recording an episode with the director of publishing and comics outreach for Kickstarter. She's going to come on the show, and she's going to talk all about Kickstarter and how they work with authors and what authors can do and how they can best set up a Kickstarter and what they can expect, all that good stuff.
I mean, that's incredible though, because it's like it changes the model. We always think of, if you're a self-published author, you write your book and hopefully you sell enough copies to pay for you to write the next book, and then you sell more copies. This kind of wouldn't it be a dream if you were a self-published author of like you getting the money first and then you can pay your mortgage and just focus on writing the book? I mean, that seems like a dream come true. And apparently it's a dream that people are pursuing and with success.
Yeah, I know. I don't really know a lot of the details about it yet because I haven't spoken to her. But I saw some information about it and it looks very interesting to me. I saw some numbers and so I thought it would be really cool to have her on the show. And what I thought would be even cooler is if people that see this episode, if they're interested in Kickstarter and have some thoughts about it and have some questions, if they want to send that in to us before next week, before Tuesday of next week, so before May 16th, we can try and ask Oriana if we'll get the answers from her, but like it's not a big deal. I realize that this is sort of rushed. Like this is going to come out on May 10th or no, May 11th. And then, we're recording with her on the 16th. So there's only a few days, but it gives listeners the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. If they think of anything that they want to ask her, send it in to us, leave it in the comments below, or even send us an email through the website, or if you have our email address. And then, we'll pass it along to her. And if not, that's no problem. Like we have lots of questions we can ask her, but I just thought it would be kind of neat if anybody has any out there in the listening audience, if they want. This will give them a chance to ask directly to Kickstarter.
I think that's fantastic. I mean, it's really cool to have like an organization like Kickstarter come on as well. And I know when I listen to podcasts, sometimes they have like the readers' questions or the host never ask the questions you want. So like this is the opportunity to actually ask a question that is relevant to you.
Right. Well, I hope we do ask the questions that people want, but yeah, I agree. Sometimes, we probably miss some that are important. So, So listen, if you guys are out there and you're interested in Kickstarter and thinking about it, and you have anything you want to make sure that we cover, send it in to us, and we will be sure to ask it next week. And then that episode, I don't know for sure if it's going to come out on the next Thursday, or it'll either be next Thursday or the Thursday after. So these questions will get answered pretty quickly.
That is going to be really exciting.
Yeah. So then the other thing I mentioned is that I thought it would be fun to go through sort of the top 5 podcasts that we've done this year. And in terms of popularity, in terms of the listens on the different audio only podcast sites as well as on YouTube, so combined, I sort of went through the numbers and added them all up. And so we'll go through them and we'll talk about each one. So let's start with number 5 and we'll work our way down to number 1, where number 1 being which is the most popular of the topics, right? So number 5 was episode 53 with Kay Webster about Patreon. And
that's a really interesting one because it kind of ties in with the Kickstarter. So people are interested, clearly.
Yeah. I mean, the idea with Patreon is that people are sort of paying you for extra stuff often, right? Whereas Kickstarter, similar. Kickstarter also gives lots of things, right? With Kickstarter, you sign up for you become sort of a backer of the project, but different levels of backing. So if you give $10, then you get the book, and then if you give $20, you get like a hardcover version of the book, and then if you give $50, you get like a signed gold hardcover, whatever. So with Patreon, it's sort of different in the sense that you sign up sort of as an ongoing subscriber, and there can be different levels with that as well. And it doesn't even have to be Patreon. I remember in the episode, Kay Webster had talked about how she started with Patreon, but then she moved to some sort of a membership program that was not Patreon, but that she ran right through her website.
And cuts out the middleman completely.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because obviously Patreon is taking their cut, which is fine. Especially if you're just starting, it's not like they take a huge amount, right? But it also probably gives you more control, but it also is more work. So you have to make sure that it's worth it. And you have to be tech savvy enough and have a website and all that stuff. So I think, for most people, they would at least want to start with Patreon, and then, if they feel very confident in doing it themselves, then they can, and it's going well, then maybe they could move and do some sort of a non-Patreon version of it on their own website.
Yeah, that episode is a really good one to listen to. And it's funny, since then I've spoken to, because we got started in this business by writing naughty stories, so to speak. And there are some authors who write naughty stories who now have Patreon rather than trying to publish them individually, because there are people who are really into whatever niche it is that they cater to, and so they would like a Patreon, so they get regular stories without having to buy them individually as ebooks of Amazon. And then have
that's a great idea, right? Because those erotic shorts are generally, you can still sell them on Amazon, but they make it tough, right? They'll dungeon you, and plus, people don't necessarily want to pay $2.99 or whatever it is for a 5,000 word short story. When we started, everyone was paying that, and that was fine, right? But then things changed, and novels became a thing, so we shifted to novels, and that was fine too. But there are people out there that still write erotic short stories, and this gives them sort of a way to get this whole bunch of people that are willing to, say, pay them whatever, $5 a month, $10 a month, and then they'll get I don't know how many stories they're getting for that, but they get them on a regular basis, basically, right?
And they also don't show up in your custom, your shopping box when your wife is going through Amazon.
That's true. All of a sudden, you're also bots when your kid goes and says he wants to buy a teddy bear, and then you pull it up, and all your also bots are littered with erotic.
What's a reverse harem, Daddy?
Yeah. So yeah, it's a great thing. Plus, you don't have to pay. Well, I guess you're still paying Patreon a cut. You don't have to pay Amazon a cut, I guess. But yeah, I think that it allows you to probably do a lot more. I don't know the particulars of people that are doing that, but I can already think of a whole bunch of things. Obviously, you can pump out those 5,000 word short stories faster than you can pump out novels. So you're probably delivering a nice steady stream to your subscribers, and maybe there are some extras that they can give as well. I remember Kay Webster talked a lot about some of the things that she was giving out, and I remember that a lot of them were really interesting ideas. Like, she had alternate versions and like hardcovers, a specific fancy hardcovers, or signed hardcovers, or bookmarks, or limited edition stuff, and she gave some of her members access to her overstock so they could buy some of the stuff. Yeah, like, there's a whole bunch of different things you can do if you're really creative. And she had a lot of great ideas in there that I had never even thought about. And then, the cool thing was that she went through sort of the mistakes she made and how she sort of figured out what worked best. And that gives you sort of leg up if you're going to go do it. You don't have to go through some of those growing pains.
Absolutely. Learn from other people's mistakes, which actually is a really great segue into the next podcast, which was one of my favorites from this year as well.
Yeah. So the next one would be episode 63, which would be the bestseller Blueprint. Caitlin Silva came on, and she, so Caitlin has her own podcast, the 1 minute, is it the 1 minute? I was on it, so I should know. Let me just check really quickly. It is
1 minute memory span.
That's me. It's called 1 minute writing tip. And so I had done that back in, I believe, March. And so I got her to come on to our show as well. And she talked about how to, the steps, the blueprint that it takes from going from sort of idea to bestseller and everything in between, right? I
thought this episode was so valuable because there are so many people. That's that's the first question they ask when we do consult calls. Sometimes it's just like, how do you launch a book? And there's no one way to do it, but it is really interesting to hear one person's way to do it, because you can try that and then you can tweak it yourself. And I mean, That's the launch strategy. That's what makes or breaks you as an author, isn't it? You can write the best book in the world, but it will languish in obscurity unless you do a really strong launch.
Yeah, and she even said like there was different launch strategies, and she went through a few of the different launch strategies that you can run. And I think you're right. Like it's not that you need specifically to have to follow these steps exactly to have a bestseller. And in fact, listen, you could follow steps and not have a bestseller. But the point I think of that episode was more about the idea that, you know, figuring out this blueprint or the plan, whatever works for you, and hers was a good starting point, and then following it and then tracking it and the success and failure of each step and how each one works allows you then on the next book to improve on the things that didn't work. You know, if you do it sort of willy-nilly and you just sort of fly by the seat of your pants and things don't work out, sometimes it's hard to sort of figure out exactly, you know, where it went wrong next time, so that, you know, you're like, okay, I don't remember, did I do this or did I do that, or what order did I do it in, and maybe if I switch that up. If you don't remember because you were sort of just going as you thought of each thing, which is, you know, the way I used to do it, then, you know, it makes it a lot harder to be able to either replicate the success or to fix issues that came up.
And also to be adaptable. I know what really knocked me when I was publishing was when Amazon started introducing the advertising into the product pages. And I used to launch my book for free and like be guaranteed a really good spot once I did that, and that would bring in thousands of dollars per month, and that just disappeared. And so having a good launch strategy is there. It allows you to pivot. So it's like, okay, go from giving your book away for free, pay a little more, get your book sold as for 99 cents or something like that. Maybe that's what's going to get you the ranking and the visibility that you used to be able to get from free. So yeah, having a plan and a strategy is so important. And
yeah, I mean, what's that?
Oh, she got quite tactical too about, you know, do this, do that, do that.
Yeah. And she laid it out, not just from the stage of, you know, after your book was written, but she went right from the beginning, from like idea, you know, mapping out your plan of your story and you know, writing it and then editing it and getting your cover done and all the steps, and which is helpful for new authors for sure, right? Because sometimes they don't know the steps, right? And that's, like you were saying, sometimes that's when they come to us, they're just getting started and they're like, I don't know what to do and I don't know where to go. And so, you know, if you do that all ahead of time, you're saving time and you're saving stress too, right? You can just be like, I got to do this, this, and this. I don't have to like now realize that I don't know what to do. And I committed to, you know, putting it out in this promo, but I don't yet have a cover because I didn't realize I had to do, you know, find the cover designer and, you know, like all the things that you have to do. If you have it laid out in a plan and a blueprint, it makes it all flow so much easier, and it's going to lead you to success a lot faster.
Absolutely. And that's the thing you can learn from other writers. And, you know, she's presenting this blueprint, but that's the value I think we found when we were part of like writers groups and stuff like that. We shared our knowledge and shared what worked and shared what didn't work, which that's kind of an elegant segue into our next episode that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. So the next one is episode 67, which was all about writers groups, and Mimi Barber was the guest at that time. And so Mimi had started a group of authors that were sort of writing the same sort of stuff, and you know, they put together a community, an online community that they use to sort of help each other promote their books and you know, just learn about things together, right? Which is always something that you and I have talked about was something that was super important to us when we started.
Absolutely. And so there, I mean, Mimi's group is a great group and like has specific things that are done so well. But I think any group, anytime you're talking to authors, especially when there are authors who've been successful in that group, can be so valuable. I mean, I remember in our writing group when we got started together, there was that thing when KDP got launched. KDP Select got launched for the first time. And it was our the chap in charge of our writing group was like, you need to get in on this, you need to get in on this. And I did because of that. And that with those, it skyrocketed my earnings. And I might have procrastinated for months and 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 if and but the fact that you can talk to other authors who've already done it and seen the value of it means that you just get to bypass all of the learning and the mistakes and the trial and error.
Yeah, for sure. I don't even think I would have had the success that I had without that group, because different people think in different ways, right? So, I would have probably approached writing, and self-publishing very differently, and then being exposed to other authors with other ideas, and that have tried other things, and then you build on their success, and it just takes you to that other level so much faster than you would get to on your own. The rising tide lifts all ships, right? So I think that's one of the biggest things that being part of a community does for you. And there's lots of different ways, and I know that there are a lot of sort of public groups out there, that people can join. There's Reddit groups. There's all sorts of different K-boards. There's all sorts of different things. But what Mimi was talking about was sort of a different thing than those sort of public forums. I think the problem with the public forums a lot of times is there's, first of all, the community is much larger, so it's harder to sort of build those bonds and those relationships with the other authors, because there's just so many people, and they're coming and going, and you see different people all the time. But also, I think that a lot of authors are sort of more cautious about sharing things in a public forum because, well, for a couple reasons. One, because you don't know what people are going to do with that information, and I think we've seen cases where authors have said something about themselves and shared their pen names, for example, and then had other authors that were part of that board sort of start doing negative things or leaving bad comments. I mean, it's sad, but it happens. It doesn't always happen, but it can happen, and it's more likely to happen in sort of those more open and anonymous and public forums. And then the other reason being that some people figure something out that works well for them, and they don't mind sharing it with a few people. But if they share it with everyone, then it sort of potentially dilutes the value of whatever that thing is. Like if you figured out something that's doing well, and then all of a sudden everyone's doing it, it doesn't do as well, right?
It's funny, people, Mark Dawson's Ads for Authors course, everyone says it was great for all the authors who were in there originally. And then after a while, it became like this is how every successful author is doing it. So it actually reduces the effectiveness of that particular strategy.
Yeah. And we've talked about that before, where, when you and I started, I think the first book of mine that made it to the bestseller list, and it was like, it did well. I think I was in the top 10 or 20 on Amazon, never mind on romance. It was on Amazon. And that was on, I think, $300 worth of ad spend. And then by the end, you could spend thousands and not move the needle the same way, because so many authors were doing Facebook. When we started, like, nobody was doing it. And it was like, our books were like one of the only ones being promoted. So sure, we did well. But then once everybody starts doing it, it's like, okay, well, now that, the ad spend cost goes up, right? Because the cost per click, there's so many more people doing it. And B, the amount of people that can click on each potential book goes down because they're being spread out between all the other books. And so the value of it goes down. So your cost goes up, your value goes down. And it just became harder and harder to make good money through low ad spend.
And that's where, if you're part of a closed author group, they can be like, hey, have you tried TikTok? Have you tried BookBub? Have you tried this? Have you tried, the great piece of advice you gave me is, have you tried not writing romance novels about MMA fighters? And I did that, and it's like, oh, look.
Yeah, well, there is a market for that, but I don't think it was as big as you'd hoped, right?
Absolutely.
but yeah, I mean, and I think with Mimi's group, they took a more hands-on approach. I remember she was talking about how she was, everybody in the group sort of had a role, right? There was somebody who was in charge of, the website, somebody who was in charge of, collecting the fees, because, they were paying to host it. So they just sort of split those costs between everybody. So, it depending on how you do it, there are sometimes, more overhead involved, but it sounds like it was certainly worth it for her. That group has been going on for many, many years, and successfully. Many of them are best-selling authors, and and a lot of that has to do with how helpful they were for each other. When you and I were doing it, it was a private group, but it was a private Reddit group, so we didn't actually have to do sort of any of that. There was a couple people that were moderators. I think I was one of the moderators, but there was no, we didn't have to worry about website hosting and all that business. It was just, that was all taken care of for you. And there's probably other ones out there now. But yeah, anybody can start one. And if you have a group of like-minded authors to bring together, you can really do well.
I think I mentioned in that podcast, there was one moment, we all used to be writing stories and we got excited when one person made more than $1,000 a month. And then there was that one person who was like, I made more than $10,000 in a month. And the next month, a bunch of us authors did, because it was almost like, hey, if he can do it, I can do it.
Yeah. Once you see something is possible, it becomes almost like easy. Not easy necessarily, but when you have that mental thing like, oh, nobody can make that much money, you don't really try to make that much money because you figure nobody can do it. And then you see somebody did it and you're like, oh, and then you start changing your ways and you're like, oh. But without that community, you wouldn't learn those things. And that's why I think the community is so important. And I think the other thing is the idea of building on a community, even if you're not part of an official, group, a small private group or whatever, being known in the author world, self-publishing community, I don't want to say it's small. It's not small, but a lot of the authors in your genre sort of know each other. Every time we talk to authors, they always reference all the other authors that they know, and they're helping each other, and they know of each other. Some people become bigger names than others, obviously, but I think that things like getting yourself out there and known in the author community is another way of doing that, aside from being part of a specific group, right? So for instance, the authors that come on to this podcast or other podcasts, they're not doing it to promote their books necessarily, because our audience is not readers. I mean, sure, yeah. Authors read, right? But the idea is not that you're coming on to say, hey, I wrote this romance novel. The idea is, to help the author community by teaching them something that you are good at, that maybe they can learn from, and in the hopes that they're also going to one day share what they know back to you. But also it's to become known to your fellow authors, so that if opportunities come from that, you make your opportunities by becoming known, so that when somebody says, hey, I need somebody who knows something about Patreon, then they go and they see that episode, and then they contact Kay, and then they talk to her, and maybe there's some synergies where they work together and something happens, right? So it just helps to sort of be known in the community. And things like this, or writing articles for websites and stuff, there's lots of ways you can sort of become known in the community, even if you're not part of a private group.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then so that was number 3, I guess. We're 5, 4, 3. Yep. So for number 2, so this is the second most popular of the podcasts we've done in 2023. It was episode 60 with Golden Angel, and that was backlist mining.
Yeah, this is another great video. Well, not video, podcast. But no, I found it really, really valuable, because I think these days, with advertising being so prevalent, and with launches not like being as stratospheric as they used to be, being able to earn money from the books you've already published is invaluable. And I think it's over the long term that is going to be your route to a successful writing career. It's like if you can get your books to pay for you to write your new books, then you've hit you're golden.
Exactly. You're a golden angel.
Yes.
I think, one of the things that a lot of authors forget is that their backlist still has a lot of value, right? You're always focused on your next big thing, your next book. And you should be. There's obviously, you want to put most of your focus into your latest release. But there's a lot of time in between where you don't have a new release. And even when you do, there's no reason to ignore your backlist. Those are all words that you wrote and that still have total value. With books, especially, the genres, fantasy, science fiction, romance, YA, it's not like they get old. Maybe in a lot of years, the science fiction might seem dated, but most of that stuff, most of the genres, that information isn't going bad. And, just because somebody didn't buy it when it first came out doesn't mean, they're not going to enjoy it just as much a year after it came out, if they never read it before. So, people ignore their backlist thinking that they always just want to sell their latest book, but there's lots of people, there's always new readers that haven't read your previous books.
Yeah, I mean, I notice whenever I publish a new book, sales for the first book in my series normally match the sales for the new book in the series, just because people are like, oh, this new book looks interesting, but I want to start from the beginning of the series. And so having your books connected and setting up like a strategy to make sure that you are connecting all of your books, making it easy for people who like one book to find your other book is hugely valuable and just magnifies the impact of everything you do.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't even have to have a series. It definitely helps. When you have a series or at least connected books, it's even easier. But even if you don't, people are still gonna, if they like your book, they're still gonna look back and see what else you've written and give those ones a try. But if they're in the same genre, for sure they will. If they're in a totally different genre, that's another story. But I know that, when I find a reader or an author that I like, I typically go and read all their stuff, even if it's not a series.
Yeah. And sometimes it's fun to discover stuff and, how they wrote when they first started writing and where they narrowed into their particular niche. I found with advertising as well, it's the money I make. A majority of my money now advertising my older books, because there was one book that was massively successful and it sold thousands and thousands of copies, but thousands of copies, even in the realm of the number of people who are subscribed to Kindle Unlimited, is just a tiny fraction. So you're like, there are so many other people who've never seen this book before, and it's just a question of getting it in front of them.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people too, they think of the idea. So authors, a lot of times, the successful ones, and hopefully anyone listening to this, is always building their subscriber list, their newsletter, their list of fans that they can then send messages to, emails to tell them about their newest release. But that isn't the only thing you need to tell them about. You absolutely can talk about your old books. And I think that a lot of authors think, well, if they're on my list, they're a fan, and they probably read the old ones, so why would I promote those ones? But that's not necessarily the case. There's people are joining your list all the time, and likely from your latest release that just got pushed, and maybe you got a book bub, or maybe you advertised it in a different place, and now you're getting all sorts of new readers that sign up, and they haven't read all your stuff. And sure, there are people like us that will actively go and say, oh, I like this author, I'm going to go read their old books. But some people don't think to do that. They just sign up. They say, I did like this book, and they'll sign up. And then, if you send them an email and say, hey, here's some other books that you might like, you might get more sales out of it. It's not just, sure, there will be people that have read that, and so those aren't relevant to them, but the content of your newsletter is never going to be relevant to everybody. So and it doesn't have to be the only thing you talk about in your newsletter, right? You could talk about whatever you're going to talk about, and at the end, always have something about one of your books, and it doesn't always have to be the latest book.
Yeah, and it's kind of nice to go and revisit them. I sometimes read my old books and I'm like, who the hell wrote this?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, Golden Angel was filled with great ideas for how to promote it. It wasn't just, newsletter. But I think the one I remember that I really liked, and I hadn't really, ever sort of thought of before, is she talked about that book club that she ran, that she and some other authors had put together. And this was something where she and other authors that write in the same genre got together, and they basically promoted the idea of this book club, that if you sign up, you would get a new book every month. And these would be books that are for sale on Amazon, but they're not free. So there's value there, right? I mean, obviously, if you're saying we're going to give you a book that's perma-free, there's not a lot of value there. They can just go do that anyway. But the idea is that, let's say there's 12 authors and they all get together and they all commit to giving one book every month. So then all those authors sort of promote that book club to their own lists. So let's say you have 12 authors, and each author has, I don't know, only 200 people on their list. Well, that's 2,400 people now that you can potentially get on your master list. And those people are probably coming from one person out of the 12. So yeah, they've read the book for January, let's say, but they haven't read all those other books, and they haven't discovered those other authors that write in the same genre. So now, they're getting a book for free, and they're discovering a new author in a genre they already like, and potentially earning money by when they go and they buy from the backlist of those authors. And that, to me, is an absolutely amazing idea, right? Because it sort of like expands your reach to other people in the same genre, just by partnering up, as we were talking just a moment ago about the value of having other authors in your community, and being and knowing them, and hooking up with them, and the synergies and the opportunities that can arise. This is one of them. You meet up with a bunch of people and you start up as something like that. Now you have this group of 12 times as many people that can read your book, can sign up for your newsletter, can buy your backlist. It really, really expands your reach, and I think it's a phenomenal idea.
And it just shows the value of like having more than one book out. A lot of people are like, how do I promote this one book? It's like, apart from HarperCollins, Harper Lee, all of the great authors just wrote more and more books. But that's how you do it. That's how you make a career out of this.
Yeah, I mean, sure, anybody can have a runaway success, but most people are sort of building on their success one book at a time. So you definitely want to have multiple books, and so this is probably not something you would do if you only had one, but it's when you have a few, that's another thing that you can do with the books on your backlist, especially if you find that you're not selling a lot of them anymore, and you aren't doing a lot of the other techniques for promoting your backlist. This is pretty much an easy way to do it, where you're just getting together with a bunch of other authors, and you each give away a book that's for sale, but that maybe isn't selling as much anymore because it's older. It doesn't mean it doesn't have value. It just means that, you're done promoting that one and you've moved on to another one, but all those other people, they haven't necessarily read it before. So, I think it's a fabulous idea. So then finally, number one on our list, and this one actually, it was almost double the amount of listens and views as even number two. Definitely it was double, number 5, and it was, so it was a runaway success. And that was episode 59 on AI writing with Nathan Cole. And this is something that I'm a big fan of, ChatGPT and the AI stuff in general, and I've talked about it in various forms, and on my newsletter, and I think we talked about it in the blog. But this is really a very exciting and scary sort of thing, right?
Yeah, I mean it's such a relevant topic right now, isn't it? Everyone's talking about it, everyone's experimenting with it. You've got Elon Musk writing a letter saying like we need to have a moratorium on AI development for 6 months. We've all been watching Terminator movies with closer retrospection now. Yeah, you paused. I was just making sure you hadn't paused. So I mean, AI is what everyone is talking about.
Yeah, I think that not just for writing, right? They're talking about it. I think the thing is with AI, or sorry, with anything, you're going to see the internet is sort of an echo chamber, right? The more things you search, the more you're going to see them in your sort of results in your news feeds and whatever. So I think sometimes I'm unsure how popular it's becoming because I'm into AI stuff, and so a lot of my feeds and a lot of my news articles that I see are about it, right? So then I start to think, oh, everybody's but it is becoming sort of very, very mainstream now, and I think at this point everybody's sort of heard about it. Everybody's sort of if they're not excited about it, they might be wary about it, and both of those are perfectly valid. But I think ignoring it is the only thing you shouldn't do. I think that
Absolutely.
It's okay to be excited about it and it's okay to be scared about it, but I don't think you should ignore it.
Now, I think what's really interesting that Nathan showed us was how it's a tool. Because I guess if you said, hey, Adobe Premiere Pro is going to end the movie industry because it means anyone can make a movie. It's like, no, anyone can edit a movie, and it gives you all these powerful tools, but you still have to be able to do the things to do it. And it's like Nathan did a really good job of explaining how AI can be a tool to help you write, but it's really not in the stage where it's going to write your book for you at this point.
Right. And I mean, that's what people have to understand is that at least currently it's not going to put you out of work. And, probably not for a while at least, but you can still use it as a tool to help speed your writing, help edit your writing, help improve your writing, help brainstorm for your writing. That's where I think it really shines, for me at least, because I use it. I mean, there's times where I have trouble thinking of something specific, and I just ask ChatGPT about it, and it like tells me and it gives me an idea about it, and then I'll have a back and forth. And I wrote about this actually in a recent newsletter where I did a prompt where I said, imagine you're in a writer's room, on a television sitcom, and come up with 3 personalities that are all different and have a different sort of sense of humor and different sort of writing style. And I'm the lead writer, and let's brainstorm the idea for a sitcom. And I mean, I'm not ashamed to say, I spent like an hour of going back and forth, having a discussion with these like 3 writers in the writer's room on ChatGPT, coming up with what I thought was a pretty good idea by the end of it. And it's not one that I would have thought of on my own, right? But it also didn't come directly from ChatGPT. It came from, ChatGPT, the personality saying, hey, what about this? What about this? And me saying, yeah, I don't really like that, or that's really cliche, or, or I like that idea. Why don't we do this instead? And then we jump on that idea. And then, and maybe that idea wouldn't pan out. And I'm saying, let's go back and start again. And eventually something would evolve, and you guide it, right? But it sort of takes you sometimes into places that you wouldn't have gone on your own, which I think is really, really interesting.
I think that's so valuable. I mean, there's that old adage, when you're writing a book and you get writer's block, you should write a scene where the hero or heroine comes home and finds their apartment has been ransacked, and then you have to it's that wild card. I think with AI, when you're doing these things, it can provide you with wild cards that you might not have thought about.
Yeah, and I think that people are using it to do like things like blurbs, and to sort of improve on their writing. Like you could take something that isn't polished, the notes from a meeting, let's say, and you put it in and you say, turn this into a PowerPoint slide or an email or whatever, right? And it just speeds up that process, even if you're not using it verbatim. You can say, create a job posting that for somebody that does this and focuses on this, and it'll just spit it out for you in the format it needs to be. People are getting it to improve on their resumes, improve on their cover letters, right? It's really, really taken things to another level for non-writers and writers alike. And I think that it's true that it will put some people out of work, but I don't think that writers really have to worry about it. I think it's and not yet, at least. It's just something that we should use as a tool more than anything else. And it just makes things easier. And anyone who hasn't tried it yet, I mean, I definitely urge them to give it a try, because first of all, it's free, so why not? But you might find that it can help you, but you might also, if it's something that you're sort of worried about, you might also find that you don't necessarily have anything to worry about yet. I don't think it's going to be writing books and replacing authors just yet.
No, I mean, even down to blurbs, it's like, one of the things I do is I write blurbs for people. It can write a serviceable blurb, but it can't write a good blurb. But then again, what it can do is I find it quite useful when you ask it to write a blurb for something. Maybe the blurb that it comes up with isn't what you want to use, but often it will highlight the parts of the book or what you feed it that are the real moments of conflict that would, if you focus on those, it would make your own blurb stronger.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely I find as well, like I'll use it to do something like that as well, and I'll use it like often to sort of like sum up a blog post or something, and then I'll take that and I'll rework it myself. And then sometimes I'll go back and forth a whole bunch of times, right, where I'll say I don't like what it wrote, but I liked a couple of the lines or the wording choices it did, and then I rewrite it, and then I put it back in, and then it changes it, and then I'll take the pieces I like and I rearrange them or whatever, and it's really, really useful that way. Like it saves a lot of time. I mean, I think when I was writing full time, I was a much faster writer. Now I'm a much slower writer, and for me it really has sped things up a lot, right? Like I can get there, but it would take me a lot longer, and now I get there just way faster. But I think Nathan is one of those guys that like just goes all in on what he's trying to figure out. He was the one who was the person who started the writing group that you and I were part of, and he was instrumental in sort of leading it and guiding it. And he's doing sort of the same thing with the AI tools. Like he just jumped right in. He's put them on his own servers, and he's constantly just figuring stuff out. I'm part of a private writing group that he's in, and he's always posting about it and talking about what he's learned. So I definitely want to get him back on to talk more about it in the future if he wants to come on, because with AI it moves so fast. Like it's already miles beyond where it was when he was on just a couple months ago. And in fact, there's an article about, I think it was an internal memo or email that Google had sent, where they're basically saying like, they're kind of worried about the fact that AI has moved so fast and become so, like, it's gone open source. Meta went and they leaked some version of their AI model called Lambda that people could use, and when they did that, it was incredible how fast people took that and improved on it. And it was like every few days you were seeing crazy new advances. Like we look at OpenAI and it's run on all these servers, and you hear about this all the time, how because Bing invested $10 billion in it to put it into Microsoft, to put it into Bing, and talking about how much they're losing every day, because when people do the searches, it's costing them money on the servers because it's running this massive model, right? But people took this Lambda model, and within a few days they had it running on a Raspberry Pi, right? Which is just like a computer on a chip or on a card. And obviously it was super slow, and it wasn't the same. But then within a few more days, they advanced even further, and now you can run it on a laptop, you can run it on a desktop, you can train a model of your own for like $100, and have it running on your own desktop, your own version of ChatGPT. And people have done studies, and they found that it's almost as good as ChatGPT, even though you have it running on your own system. And this is just within like a month or two of this model getting released. Like, it's just exploding. So what it can do today, what it could do a few months ago, is different than what it'll be doing in a few months from now. It's moving at a lightning pace. And again, I'm not super concerned that it's going to start writing novels for us, but if you ignore it, I think you're really missing out on an incredibly powerful tool that can really take you to another level.
And you want to be on the ground floor of that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it'll be it'll be writers. It won't be writers versus AI. It'll be writers versus writers that use AI. It'll be the writers that use AI will have the advantage over the writers that don't. In some cases, it won't be writers against just AI by itself. So I think that's where you want to be. You want to be embracing that tool as it grows, so that you can grow with it and you're not sort of left behind.
Yeah, that's true that. And hopefully we'll get Nathan back.
Yeah. But I think that's it. That was number 1. And that probably takes us to the end of this episode as well, I think.
Yeah, but I think it's been fun to go over those again, and I think it's been really valuable. So hopefully, if there are people listening who missed any of those, go back and find them, and I'm sure we can put links down below or something like that for the top 5 episodes. You can go straight to them.
Yeah, and like I said, if you have any thoughts about Kickstarter, any questions that you want us to ask, then put them in the comments below. Send us an email through the website or whatever. And we'll do our best to get you some answers in our chat with a Kickstarter director of publishing next week.
That sounds fantastic.
Great.
So I guess that wraps things up. Hopefully everyone has been enjoying this episode. If so, let us know in the comment section down below. Leave us a comment. Tell us which podcast you liked, if there's one that we missed out. Because we were just going off the numbers, weren't we? But if there's a particular podcast that you've liked this year, let us know down below. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And I guess, any final thoughts, Craig?
No, just, thanks everyone for listening. If you have ideas about future guests you want to see on the show, if you want to come on the show and you have something you want to talk about, reach out to us. We're always happy to hear from you. And otherwise, we'll see you again next week.
Absolutely. Don't be a stranger. So we'll be back next week with another episode of Fully Booked. Until then, stay tuned.